Beneath the endless canopy, the Amazon rests in hushed stillness. Its rivers gleam like strands of silver, weaving life through an ocean of green. For centuries it seemed untouched, a realm outside of time, yet appearances can be deceiving. What if the Amazon was never an untouched wilderness, but instead a vast green veil hiding the memory of a lost civilization? To most of us, the Amazon has always seemed like the final frontier, a place beyond history, a kingdom ruled only by nature. Its scale is overwhelming, more than 5 million square kilometers of rivers, forests and morning mist rising with the Sunday. People call it the lungs of the earth, a wild cathedral of green. But listen carefully, and another story begins to stir beneath the leaves. It is not the story of untouched forest, but of cities, of roads, of voices now swallowed by silence. Almost 5 centuries ago, in 1541, the Spanish explorer Francisco de Orellana set his canoe on the Rio Napo, high in the mountains of Peru and Ecuador. That river carried him into the mighty Amazon, a world of unending waters and endless trees. At his side travelled the Dominican friar Gaspar de Carvajal, who carried ink and parchment. He wrote of villages stretching for miles along the banks, of great roads cut through the forest, of plazas alive with gatherings too vast to count. He told of warriors guarding their homes, of fields heavy with crops, and of strange lights glowing at night where 2 rivers meet but do not blend. To him, it seemed as though a chain of stars had fallen from the sky and settled upon the water. When their words returned to Europe, they were met with disbelief. Scholars dismissed them as fever dreams, illusions born of hunger and exhaustion. They pointed to the thin soil of the rainforest, quick to lose its strength, unfit to nourish large populations. They spoke of relentless rain, of suffocating heat, of swarms of insects, and declared that no great civilization could have risen here. For centuries this verdict remained unchallenged. The Amazon, they said, was eternal forest, never city, never home to millions. The voices of Orellana and Carvajal faded into legend. Textbooks repeated the same refrain, that the Amazon had always been wilderness, incapable of sustaining more than scattered tribes. The idea of hidden cities was cast aside, remembered only as myth, and yet faint traces survived. 17th century maps sometimes marked curious symbols along the river, signs of settlements that later vanished from the record. Indigenous traditions carried whispers of ancestors who built roads and markets, who gathered in places larger than villages, beneath the open sky. These memories lingered like smoke from a fire long gone cold. Now the forest itself has begun to speak. With the eyes of modern science, patterns emerge beneath the canopy, vast earthworks, networks of roads, and settlements too large to dismiss. Perhaps Orellana and Carvajal were not dreaming after all. Perhaps they truly glimpsed the remains of a civilization claimed by time and trees. So tonight, as you drift with this story, let the current of the river carry your thoughts. Imagine the shadows of towering trees, the chorus of birds settling at dusk, the flicker of firelight on distant banks. Hear the murmur of voices, the faint rhythm of ceremonies rising into the night. Walk along forgotten roads that stretch straight through the jungle. Stand before earthen mounds that once were pyramids, now cloaked in vines and silence. If you enjoy these gentle journeys into forgotten history, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you believe might still lie hidden beneath the trees? The Amazon rainforest has long been described as a place where civilization could never take root. Early explorers wrote of endless rain, of rivers that flooded their banks and swallowed whole landscapes, of heat and humidity so heavy that wood rotted and stone cracked. Clouds of insects filled the air, carrying fevers through villages and camps. To those who studied the forest later, the greatest obstacle lay in the soil itself. At first glance it seemed dark and promising, but it was poor beneath the surface. Scientists called it oxisol, a soil thin, acidic, and stripped of nutrients by centuries of rain. Crops planted in it often thrived for a season, then collapsed. To generations of scholars this was proof enough. No city could stand here. No fields could endure. The Amazon was wilderness, vast and eternal, untouched by human hands. Yet what if that image was never true? What if the forest, so often imagined as empty, was instead a veil? What if beneath its canopy, now heavy with green, there once lay a world of people and cities, hidden by time? The first evidence of that world appears not in stone walls or ruined towers, but in the soil. Scattered across the basin are patches of earth unlike any other. Local farmers have always known them. They call the soil terra preta, the black earth of the Amazon. Unlike the fragile ground around it, this earth remains fertile year after year. Maize grows tall, cassava ripens in abundance, fruits continue to flourish. Where ordinary soil fails after a season, terra preta endures. When scientists began to study these dark soils, they made a discovery that overturned centuries of belief. Terra preta was not a natural accident, it was created. Across generations, people added charcoal from their hearths, fragments of broken pottery, the bones of fish, and the remains of plants. Layer upon layer, the soil absorbed these traces of daily life. Slowly, it changed. What had been fragile became strong, it held water, it held nutrients, and it resisted the rains that stripped other fields bare. The scale of this creation is immense. Modern studies suggest that as much as 150,000 square kilometers of the Amazon may contain terra preta. That is nearly the size of Greece, scattered in thousands of patches across the basin. Some plots are small, no larger than a clearing, others spread across 200 or 300 hectares, enough to sustain whole villages. To create such soil required patience, cooperation, and the passing of knowledge from one generation to the next. It was not survival by chance, but the deliberate remaking of the land itself. If the ground holds such memory, what else might lie beneath the canopy? In western Brazil, in the state of Acre, another revelation has emerged. As deforestation cleared the trees, strange shapes began to appear in the earth. From the ground they seemed like shallow ditches. From the air their patterns were unmistakable. Circles, squares, and straight avenues etched across the landscape. Archaeologists call them geoglyphs. More than 450 have been identified so far. They date back nearly 2,000 years, and many were reused for centuries. Their purpose is debated. They do not bear the marks of fortresses or battlefields. Instead, they seem to have been places of gathering. Perhaps ceremonies were held there, perhaps markets or councils. Imagine dusk settling over one of those circles, fires burning along the embankments, voices rising in chant or song. The forest has reclaimed them now, but the lines remain etched in the soil, silent reminders that this was once sacred ground. The black earth and the geoglyphs speak with one voice. The Amazon was not empty, it was inhabited, cultivated, and shaped by human hands. But how many lived here? For centuries, scholars believed the number was small, a few 100,000 scattered along the rivers. Today, new evidence suggests otherwise. Archaeologists now estimate that before European contact, 8 to 10 million people may have lived in the Amazon. To imagine such numbers is to picture a world as populous as medieval Spain, alive with villages and towns. Communities lined the floodplains. Settlements rose on high ground. Networks of waterways carried trade, stories, and ceremonies across vast distances. What had once been dismissed as wilderness begins to look like a living web of societies. Much of that world has been lost to time, but in recent decades new technology has begun to pierce the green veil. Lidar, a method of scanning the land with beams of light from above, has revealed what the forest kept hidden. In the Bolivian Amazon, Lidar uncovered the remains of the Casarabi culture. Causeways stretch for kilometers, linking plazas and raised platforms shaped like pyramids. These were not chance clearings, but carefully planned landscapes. In Ecuador, at the northern edge of the Amazon, Lidar revealed thousands of earth mounds, plazas, and roads in the Upano Valley. These so-called garden cities, more than 2,000 years old, had vanished beneath the trees. Now their outlines return, clear as if drawn anew. Together these discoveries reshape our vision of the Amazon. The soil once thought barren was remade into fields that could last for centuries. The wilderness once imagined empty is inscribed with circles and squares. Populations once dismissed as scattered tribes are now counted in millions. and the canopy itself, long believed to be untouched, is revealed as a veil covering forgotten cities. The Amazon has always been called untamed, eternal, untouched. Yet perhaps that image is an illusion. Perhaps it is a disguise, a living forest grown over a civilization lost to time. If black earth could nourish millions, and if vast geoglyphs stretched across the forest floor, then what might the very centres of those hidden cities have looked like? Were there markets filled with voices, plazas bright with ceremony, leaders who stood at the heart of rituals now forgotten? The forest does not answer, but the questions linger, waiting beneath the veil of green. If you are still here, press like to let us know, and now we will explore the achievements and mysteries hidden beneath the Amazon's green veil. For centuries, the Amazon was described as a realm too wild for civilization, a place of endless trees and rivers where great cities could never grow. Yet the forest has begun to speak again. With every scan of Lidar, with every excavation of earth and pottery, a new story is unfolding. Hidden beneath the canopy are traces of vast communities, their achievements written not in stone but in soil, water and memory. The first great voice came from the southwestern Amazon of Bolivia, in a region called the Llanos de Mojos. This is a land of extremes, a plain that drowns in floods during the rainy season and then bakes in the dry months. To early explorers, it looked like a place where nothing permanent could survive. Yet in 2022, archaeologist Heiko Prumers and his team scanned this landscape with Lidar, a technology that sends light through the canopy to reveal the ground below. As the digital forest fell away on their screens, patterns emerged. Lines straight as arrows crossed the wetlands, rectangles and circles appeared in the plains. Slowly the outline of a city came into view. They had found the settlements of the Casarabi culture. There were 26 in total, each carefully arranged. At the heart of these sites lay plazas, broad and open, where communities once gathered. From the plazas rose earthen pyramids nearly 70 feet tall, built tier upon tier by countless hands. Causeways stretched outward for miles, raised above the marshes, linking one settlement to another. Canals and reservoirs surrounded them, capturing floodwaters and storing them for the dry months. These were not villages clinging to survival. They were cities designed to live with the flood and drought, to turn the rhythms of water into a partner. Imagine walking along a raised road centuries ago. The plain lies open, pools of water glitter in the sun, and in the distance the pyramid rises above the horizon. You arrive in the plaza as evening falls. Fires glow, children run across the open ground, traders arrive with baskets of food and goods, and on the summit of the pyramid a ceremony begins beneath the stars. This was urban life, but shaped to the rainforest, not copied from stone cities of Europe. Far to the north, where the Amazon meets the foothills of the Andes in Ecuador, another discovery rewrote what we thought we knew. In 2024, archaeologist Stephen Rostein and his colleagues published their findings on the Upano Valley. This valley, lying between mountain and jungle, seemed like any other stretch of forest. Yet beneath the soil lay the remains of an extraordinary network. Lidar and excavation revealed more than 6,000 raised platforms, foundations for homes and community buildings. Straight roads cut across the valley, some stretching for miles beyond the horizon. At the centre of these networks were plazas, open spaces that may have echoed with ritual songs and speeches. Terraces were carved into hillsides for farming, while canals drained excess water. This was not an isolated village, but a vast organised system, carefully planned and maintained. Tests showed that the settlements in the Upano Valley began around 500 years before the start of the Common Era, and lasted until about 600 years into it. They endured for more than 1,000 years, a span of time when Rome was building aqueducts and Han emperors ruled in China. During those same centuries, the people of the Upano Valley were raising thousands of platforms and carving long, straight roads into the Amazon. Archaeologist Stephen Rostein described it as garden urbanism. These were not cities of stone walls and crowded streets, but communities woven into fields, forests and waterways, living with the rhythms of the land. To imagine life here is to picture a plaza at dusk. Fires flicker along the edges, pottery painted with spirals and diamonds glows in the firelight. Voices rise in song, while food is shared from clay vessels. These designs were uncovered in the excavations, and they tell us that beauty mattered as much as survival. Far from the sea, archaeologists also found seashells brought from distant coasts. To hold a shell in the heart of the jungle is to glimpse trade routes that carried goods across mountains and valleys. The Upano Valley was not cut off from the world. It was a gateway, where mountain and forest cultures exchanged seeds, stories, and objects. The layouts of these places also carry mystery. Many of the roads of the Casarabi and the Upano run in unnervingly straight lines. In the western Brazilian Amazon, in the state of Acre, archaeologist Denise Shahn documented more than 400 geoglyphs before her passing in 2018. Circles and squares carved into the earth, dating from the first centuries of the Common Era, suggest that geometry itself held symbolic power. They were not defensive walls but ceremonial spaces. Some alignments may echo the stars, as if people sought to mirror the heavens on the ground. To stand in one of those clearings today is to wonder how rituals once moved along those lines under the light of the moon. Even the forest itself carries memory. In 2017, researcher Carolina Levis and her team published evidence that tree species such as Brazil nut, cacao, peach palm, and acai grow in greatest abundance near ancient sites. These trees did not grow thickest by chance. They are the fingerprints of cultivation, showing that people once shaped the very forest around them. What seems like untouched wilderness is, in part, a human creation, a living orchard planted over centuries. When all of these discoveries are drawn together, the image is striking. In the southwest, the Casarabi built plazas, pyramids, and canals across the floodplains of Bolivia. In the north, the people of the Upano Valley raised 6,000 platforms and linked them with long straight roads near the Andes. In the west, the earthworks of Acre carved symbols into the land, ceremonial shapes large enough to be seen from the sky. Across the central and eastern Amazon, the very forest still grows in patterns shaped by ancient farmers. These are not fragments of scattered tribes. They are the achievements of civilizations adapted to their environment, urban systems that breathed with the forest. They built, traded, celebrated, and passed down memory through earthworks, pottery, and trees. Yet for every answer, a new question lingers. Why did the Casarabi raise pyramids of earth nearly 70 feet high? What rituals crowned their summits? Why did the Upano carve so many platforms and roads? Were they processional paths, cosmic alignments, or the marks of administration? How far did their trade reach? And what stories were carried with seashells into the heart of the jungle? If plazas once glowed with firelight, if causeways once echoed with footsteps, why did those lights fade and those voices fall silent? If millions once lived in these landscapes, what force brought their world to an end? That mystery waits in the shadows of history, as we turn from the wonder of achievement to the silence of disappearance. If you feel that these discoveries suggest a true civilization once thrived beneath the Amazon's canopy, press like and share your thoughts in the comments. The story of the Amazon's hidden civilizations is not only one of creation, but also of loss. Their decline did not come in a single night of fire or conquest, but in a slow and layered silence. To understand how cities that once glimmered with life vanished so completely, we must follow the threads of climate, disease, conflict, abandonment, and even the ways in which knowledge itself chose to forget. The first thread is written in the sky. Between 925 and 1,350 of the Common Era, the Amazon experienced the long reach of the medieval climate anomaly, a period of global fluctuation that unsettled lands far beyond Europe and Asia. In 2004, paleoclimatologist Mark Bush examined sediments drawn from lakes in the eastern Amazon. The pollen grains embedded in those cores told a quiet story. Plants that thrived in wetter conditions dwindled, replaced by species that endured drought. The forest was whispering that rain no longer came as steadily as before. Floodplains that had fed generations sometimes dried too quickly. Canals carefully dug to manage water no longer held enough to nourish crops. Families who had lived by the rhythm of seasonal rains now looked at uncertain skies. No single year broke them, but over centuries this shifting climate wore away their stability. Settlements that had once thrived may have scattered, thinned, or relocated, leaving patches of land for the forest to reclaim. The second thread arrived from across the ocean. In 1541, Francisco de Orellana and the friar Gaspar de Carvajal drifted down the great river, describing villages stretching for miles and fires glowing along the banks. Yet when others followed, many of those same stretches were eerily silent. The explanation was not conquest by steel, but the spread of invisible enemies. Smallpox, measles, and influenza, carried unknowingly by Europeans, travelled faster than the explorers themselves. Historian Noble David Cook, in his book Born to Die, published in 1998, showed how epidemics swept across the Americas, devastating populations before any foreign soldier arrived. The Amazon was not spared. By the late 16th and early 17th centuries, vast regions had been emptied. A 2019 study in Quaternary Science Reviews estimated that as much as 90 to 95% of indigenous peoples may have been lost in this period. Villages that had endured for centuries collapsed in a matter of years. Imagine fires burning out in plazas, with no one left to rekindle them, fields overtaken by weeds, canoes tethered on riverbanks left to rot. The silence was overwhelming, and it spread far beyond the forest itself. In 2015, geographer Simon Lewis and colleagues studying Greenland ice cores identified a dip in atmospheric carbon dioxide dating to the early 1700s. They called it the Orbis Spike. The regrowth of abandoned farmland and gardens in the Americas, including the Amazon, had been so vast that it lowered global carbon levels. The absence of millions of people had been recorded in the chemistry of the sky. Few declines in history have ever left such a planetary signature. The third thread lies in fire and conflict. Archaeologists working in parts of the Amazon have found layers of ash at sites that were once vibrant. Some of these destructions may have come from intertribal wars in an era of scarcity, others from violence linked to European incursions. Once communities fractured and populations collapsed, there were not enough hands left to rebuild. Plazas that had been filled with markets and ceremonies lay open to the sun, then to weeds, then to saplings. Within a generation, trees began to rise over what had been spaces of gathering. The regrowth formed what ecologists today call secondary forest. In 2015, botanist Charles Clement and his team showed that these younger jungles often contain traces of human influence, with clusters of domesticated species such as Brazil nut and cacao near old habitation sites. Yet to outsiders arriving centuries later, these forests appeared seamless, as if they had always been there. The careful shaping of land by generations of people was concealed beneath the cloak of green. The final thread came not from nature, but from thought. In the 19th century, explorers and naturalists described the Amazon as a land of endless wilderness. The English naturalist Henry Walter Bates, who spent 11 years in the basin and published The Naturalist on the River Amazons in 1863, portrayed it as a realm of unbroken forest. By the 20th century, this image became accepted truth. In 1971, anthropologist Betty Meggers released Amazonia, Man and Culture in a Counterfeit Paradise. Her thesis was stark. The Amazon's thin and acidic soils could never have supported dense populations. Civilization here, she argued, was impossible. For decades, Meggers' model dominated academic discourse. Students learned that the Amazon was too fragile, too poor to sustain large societies. The accounts of Orellana and Carvajal were dismissed as exaggerations born of exhaustion and fever. Indigenous oral traditions that spoke of ancestors living in larger places were brushed aside as legend. Even early maps that marked settled regions were set aside as errors. In this way, the Amazon civilizations were hidden twice. First, the forest reclaimed their plazas, then scholarship erased their possibility from accepted knowledge. This is why the story of decline is not only natural, but forbidden. To imagine that the Amazon once held cities was, for nearly 2 centuries, to stand outside of accepted history. The forest was seen as eternal and untouched, a vision so strong that it silenced every clue to the contrary. Yet silence is never absolute. Flecks of charcoal remain in the soil, the ghosts of managed fires. Odd clusters of useful trees stand as quiet witnesses to human planting. Oral traditions remember roads and markets beneath the leaves. These fragments were not enough to change the narrative on their own, but they lingered, waiting for the tools and voices that would one day make them visible again. Today, with Lidar and new excavations, Those outlines are returning, but in the tale of decline, the focus is not on rediscovery, but on erasure. The forces that undid the Amazon civilizations were layered and relentless. Climate unsettled the rains, epidemics emptied villages, violence burned what remained, forests reclaimed the land, and scholarship for centuries closed the book. The outcome was a landscape that seemed eternal, and a history that seemed absent. If these secondary forests are indeed shrouds, then beneath them may still lie plazas, roads, and pyramids. They wait not only under roots, but also in the unspoken spaces of history. The question that lingers is simple and haunting. How many cities are still asleep, waiting for their voices to be heard once more? Stay with us, because in the next part we will uncover the hidden legacy of these forgotten cities, the traces still alive in the forest, and in the memories of those who call the Amazon home. The Amazon is never truly silent. Beneath its endless canopy, the legacy of lost civilizations still lingers. It survives in the soil, in the trees, and in the lives of people who carry their memory forward. What looks like wilderness is, in truth, a place where the past still breathes. That legacy is carried in people's blood. In 2021, geneticist Cosimo Post and an international team sequenced genomes from dozens of ancient remains and compared them with living indigenous groups across South America. They found that the Amazon basin preserved its own distinct genetic clusters, evidence that it once supported dense and interconnected populations. These groups were not isolated bands, but communities linked by rivers, trade, and marriage networks that stretched for hundreds of miles. Even after European contact and devastating collapse, those lineages did not vanish. They remain in the DNA of indigenous peoples today, a quiet but unbroken thread tying modern families to the forgotten societies that once built roads, plazas, and fields beneath the forest canopy. The legacy is also alive in the forest. In 2025, ecologists found that more than 80% of the towering canopy species in the Amazon show evidence of long-term human use. For centuries, people drew food, medicine, and meaning from these trees, favouring some and spreading them across the land. Their dominance is not chance, but the result of ancient choices. What looks like untouched forest is, in fact, a cultural inheritance, an orchard of memory planted by forgotten hands. Memory persists in story. Along the upper Rio Negro, elders still speak of a shining path, a road of light beneath the moon. Such tales are not just fantasy. They are cultural memories, fragile but enduring, keeping alive the idea of roads, plazas, and journeys that once connected lives across the basin. Even when stone and timber vanish, words hold what the forest remembers. And these legacies are not only echoes of the past, they shape lives in the present. Where indigenous lands are recognized and protected, the forest thrives more strongly, and communities suffer less from fires, smoke, and disease. The stewardship of the land, rooted in ancient knowledge, continues to safeguard human health today. The past lives on in cleaner air, safer water, and a balance between people and forest that still offers protection. Taken together, these legacies change how we see the Amazon. It is not only the lungs of the earth, or a cathedral of green. It is also a cultural landscape, where trees bear the mark of ancient care, where bloodlines carry the memory of lost cities, and where stories and traditions still echo through the forest. And so the question lingers. If the canopy still whispers of paths that gleamed in the night, if the trees still bear the imprint of ancient care, and if the lives of people today are still shaped by those who came before, then what else lies beneath the green veil? How many stories still wait, hidden in the shadows, to be heard? The forest still holds its secrets. For all the discoveries already made, vast regions of the Amazon have yet to be mapped with the eyes of modern technology. Archaeologists working today believe that thousands of earthworks, plazas, and even forgotten cities may still lie beneath the canopy, untouched by Lidar, hidden by leaves and silence. The sense of mystery is not fading, it is deepening. Each patch of unexplored forest is like a sealed page in a manuscript waiting to be read. Close your eyes and picture it. Somewhere in the depths of Brazil, a low ridge rises above the trees. At night, the moon brushes the crown of vines, and the wind bends the palms with a sound like a whispered song. No marker tells us what lies below, Yet archaeologists suspect that under the roots and soil rests another plaza, another mound, another city that has never been named. The forest conceals, but it does not erase. In 2024, scholars and conservationists in Brazil proposed something remarkable to protect the Amazon not only as a rainforest but also as a cultural landscape. Their model would recognize geoglyphs, ancient causeways, and hidden earthworks as national heritage, placing archaeology and ecology side by side. If such efforts take hold, then the future of the forest will not be measured only in carbon and rivers, but also in memory, in the preservation of civilizations whose echoes still linger under the canopy. This is not only about the past, it is about how we choose to see and protect the forest in years to come. The thought is haunting. We are surrounded by mysteries still untouched, their outlines traced only in shadows and speculation. Each Lidar scan is like a lantern passed across the forest floor, illuminating faint lines that prove the page was never blank. Yet most of the story remains sealed, waiting for someone to lift the veil. The Amazon holds its history with patience, as if inviting us to listen when the time is right. So, as night settles deeper over the forest, we are left not with answers but with images. Moonlight glinting across an unnamed mound, the chorus of insects above forgotten roads, the slow persistence of roots embracing stone. These are the closing notes of a song we cannot yet fully hear, a reminder that beneath the silence lies an unfinished story still waiting in the dark. When the green veil is finally lifted, how many chapters of human history will have to be rewritten, and how many names, journeys, and cities will rise again from the shadows? If you enjoyed this journey into the mysteries of the Amazon, please like the video, subscribe for more hidden histories, and share your thoughts in the comments. Sleep well, and good night.